Good evening. We are Bittertang, and tonight we're going to be talking about babies, how they are articulated in the material world.
I'm blanking on the artist's name at the moment, but this is a recent baby in the art world. Microphone. This is also this is an image, a painting by Fragonard, done during the Rococo, and it's a we call it the baby omelet. Actually, it has various names, and it's kind of hard to kind of figure out exactly what it is. But one of our friends, who's a Fragonard expert, said that her best friend calls it the baby omelet, and so that's the title for it. But this is a hugely influential painting in our work, and we kind of came across it a few years ago, and so that's kind of why it's located here, and that's how our obsession with babies kind of began.
In our research of then departing from the Fragonard painting, we started to explore how babies were begin to emerge in different paintings, sculptures, architectural spaces, particularly in the paintings of the Rococo. But here in some of these images, we begin to see how bodies, postures, and different morphologies in the composition of the body and the image really gave on to really strange qualities in the imagery.
The representation of babies is extremely strange as it morphs throughout history, and it's also really interesting when it does become quite architectural, or at least sculptural, and it really begins to affect the mood of the space. So our first project that kind of explored the baby omelet was this. I'll just talk about it briefly. It's a rumpus room, but it's a. We basically took the babies from the painting and produced stuffed animals, where for a child, and so they could just crawl up into the space and hang out with lots of different types of babies. And we were really interested in the kind of morphology and the material qualities of the Fragonard painting and some of the colors. We won't go into that too much, but so that's kind of how these forms developed and kind of our thoughts about this project were based.
So in this project, this is just an image extracted from a larger space, but you know, in this image is no longer about the fleshy bodies being suspended, but now you're on some immersed with them, and you are able to to really mold them, shape them, and really be playful with them.
Cuddle up.
Cuddle up.
They're your friends. This is being carried around. And so we also got into the materiality of this a lot. These are some foam tests that we did, kind of studying how to get the right color as well as the right the feel to them. And these are actually forms of a slightly different portion of the project. We sadly don't have any images of the other stuff,
But yes, here you begin to see how important it is to get to the level that we really liked, and the characteristics that we really like from the imagery that we begin to find of how they render this very fleshy objects. And so we start with we start with form, we start with material, understanding material qualities, to coloration, to then getting the final piece. So
another aspect about babies that we are very interested in is their rapid growth cycle and how they change continuously, like day to day, minute to minute. So that change is very rapid, as well as kind of the upper row shows various different types of animals, and they all kind of originate at the same point, but there's moments in the growth cycle that determine that they go in a completely different direction. And so we kind of like that idea of basically these seeds that kind of go completely different directions, and we reference our work constantly in other projects, and so they kind of originate in one form in one place, and then they kind of diverge in other projects.
Uh,
Oh, my, shoot.
Go back. Okay. So in this case, this is Microcosmic Aquaculture is a project that we began to basically fed it with our research into the morphology and the growth of babies. And in this case, as you can see, you start with a primitive orb that then once it gets thrown into the water, things begin to grow, develop, and eventually gets to the point where its life cycle ends, it dissolves, and it starts again.
And this is about also the, how a object can change shape throughout its life. And so this one is just basically kind of interested in that change as well. We'll skip this.
Skip this one.
This will take a while to load up. We'll be on it for a second. All right.
There we go. So in this image, it's a close-up of that last one of the orbs, where you can see how the section of the surface accommodates life. The space that it's holding the captive fish, while also providing a life to the wild exterior. Because, as we sort of saw it, in the ocean is not a matter of creating life, but more creating a substrate for life to emerge. Here we illustrated it. This is midlife cycle of the orbs, kind of gather around, cluster, beginning to take on this armada kind of atmosphere, where a lot of things begin to grow on it, live on it, and enjoy this very immersive atmosphere.
And at this point, the other thing that really interested us was how the orbs began to take on a life of their own. They've accumulated so much extra biological material and they're free-floating. They just become their own ecosystems, and they're really kind of their own living beings made up of lots of smaller individual beings. Which kind of brings us to our next project, which we're titling Animate Sensations, which is is about how objects can basically take on a life of their own, and how they kind of interact with people and humans are.
So here we are showing one of our first plush toys, or an attempt to design it and the design of a plush toy from a completely different way, starting from its form to how then it gets articulated and as a surface treatment. And we're titling this image Mother and Child.
But it's also about, the other thing that kind of interested us was that it's a plush toy, but we felt like we were kind of designing a creature, a new species, and that's why we have the mother and child, because we really thought about the whole kind of lifespan of the creature, and so we gave it characteristics. Let's see what's next. Here are some examinations of how it would actually move, and just kind of some of the other kind of strange effects that would come along with it. This is after they're born. They kind of cluster in frothy masses on sticks. And
so in this image, we're also we began to saw them and their potential of how, when we get them out into an environment, for example, in this case, a very simplistic environment like a branch, all of a sudden they begin to take up on a lot more characteristics, and where we felt like that direction yield very interesting possibilities to not only create the object, but then all of a sudden begin to think about it and place it into an environment.
Again, the environment, it's kind of created around the the characteristics of the animal. So some of the other ones, we actually are beginning to design the environments that they live in, because that really begins to affect the way that they move and how they like breathe and their life cycles. And it's really like that kind of designing of the environment for these made-up species is something that really is fascinating us at the moment.
In this case, here we are showing Mustachio, as we call it, in its pubescent state.
And I mean, he's kind of alone by himself, because he is this lonely kind of creature. And when they're first born, they're, as you saw in the frothy image, that they're very like communal. But soon, once they fall out of the trees, they really are kind of loners, and they're just wander around by themselves.
So if you were to encounter one of these, it would be a very, very fantastic moment.
Yeah. Let us know when it happens.
Here, this is a second plush toy. In this case, they have like a very strange interaction with each other. They seem to not really like each other, so they're kind of facing away from each other, and because of their articulation and their postures, they tend to kind of walk around in circles.
Yeah, their mouths are upward facing, and they really can't see where they're going. And since they're Siamese twins, basically, they're facing the wrong way, or opposite direction from each other. They really have a hard time walking forward. So they keep doing circles and circles, and they really can't see where they're going. And they're not communal people or creatures, but they end up being communal because they just can't get away from each other. They just keep running into each other. So
here again, beginning to place them into, in this case, still a more realistic environment, and just beginning to see how the environment, like in this case, is in the Serengeti, begins to affect the entire reading of this single object, or in this case, Siamese twins.
And we forgot to mention earlier, too, with the first image of the mustachio on a quilt. And there's this idea about designing a species that lives in its own environment. But since this is a plush toy, we're also very interested in how that plush toy comes back into the human environment and how that kind of reads. So that first image was also very specific. And there's actually a really fantastic image in the show that we forgot to put in here, of showing how these plush toys move back into the actual human environment and how that radically alters kind of the mood and the space of our world. So
here's a third creature. This one lives in the sea. This is probably the softest of them, and they're also the most sensual. They, as opposed to the two-headed guy, these ones tend to always want to cuddle and be around each other. Here is it's not, again, moving them in outside the real world and beginning for us to think about them in environments that then we would design, that we would very specifically think about them and how they relate to, in this case, an underwater scene with corals around them.
So again, the kind of design of objects and kind of the impact that they have on the surrounding environment and spaces was something from the plush toys that we really began to, again, gain interest in. And so looking at Romulus and Remus, everyone is probably familiar with the story. But again, she-wolf and babies, so here we go. With a great opportunity to get babies back into our work. And so this sculpture is amazing. But it doesn't need too many words. And even the story is fantastic. So these are just different representations of it.
So, looking at the sculpture itself and beginning to look at this baby's heads up, suckling on these nutrients that the she-wolf provides, began to really get us thinking of how, what other objects or what other ways can we achieve this great just moment of these babies or these creatures, looking for nourishment. So what we try to do in this project, and something that you will see in the show, is beginning to think about a piñata and as a succulent piñata that then begins to bridge into Romulus and Remus she-wolf.
We were very interested in the way that, piñatas are, as a game, it's, for kids, there's fascinating corollaries between the piñata and Romulus and Remus. This is basically showing kind of the similarities and how the translation kind of begins. There's this, they're both animals. Typically piñatas, more recent versions of piñatas are animals, and they have like a very furry surrounding with a very soft underbelly, and that soft underbelly, of course, everyone knows has candy in it. And that's the thing that you want to get to, just like Romulus and Remus want to get to the milk. And there's other aspects on here that, that we thought translated pretty well to piñata. So that was kind of our attempt.
Yeah, one thing, again, to mention is that in this case, we decided to show the piñata being in two pieces, one in the ground where the kids are basically devouring and really getting into the belly, the most succulent part of this object, because the thing with the piñata is that what we try to really look into is how can the form and the materiality can alter also the game of the piñata.
So these are some massing studies related to that last diagram. So this is the same model that the model in the gallery is based off of, but it's purely massing. There's none of the articulation of the feathers. But so you'll see this in a little bit. But the white portion we were viewing as the furry kind of surrounding, and then the pink zone is the area that houses the candy. And some of the morphology of this actually comes from looking at some of the features in piñatas and maybe how we can articulate the game in a different way and really prolong it and really make it much more enjoyable. So the bottom row basically shows very detailed portions of how we could articulate the surface of the piñata, and the little purple things are candy, and there's various types of protuberances from the main body that you can begin to hit in a different way, and it can release candy in a different way. And so one opportunity for prolonging the game is that you can release candy in small batches without breaking the whole thing, and so it kind of prolongs it that way. And then there's different ways of hanging the piñata, and there's also things that interfere with your playing of the piñata, and that's when you have like soft, like the upper one is, there's softness, so when you are hitting it with a rod, it may not actually break the piñata, or there's actually things that are hanging down that will get in the way of your swing. So this is an early rendering of some of these ideas based on that previous massing model. And this looks drastically different than what's in the gallery, but some of it has to do with the way that we kind of sketch and think about things. Yeah. I
mean, it was also there's multiple iterations of of the piñata in terms of like how we understand complex surfaces and how we actually begin to apply materials that live outside the render world, because a lot of this, a lot of the formal aspects of it kind of moves very rapidly three-dimensionally, and so what you see, what you will see in the show, it's an attempt to really try to understand materials that can give us this kind of effects that we explore.
And then the other thing that we were really beginning to get interested in too was the sectional quality of the piñata, because most often piñatas don't really have an interior other than they're just basically a container for candy. But we started to think about that interior as some other sort of environment. And so we've kind of divided the project into various compartments that house different types of candy. And basically, in a way, it was kind of, at this point, it really transformed into an animal for us once we began to think about the interior. And so it began to take on a life of its own, just like kind of some of the plush toys. And so the piñata became this sugar source, and it really began to kind of ooze sugar from its body. And so to give the illusion and sensation of sweetness, and so you'll see that in some of the other stuff, but we really wanted it to feel like it was made of sugar and have an interior unlike any other piñata. Yeah.
So yes, in you know, in this case, you'll see our how we begin to materialize the form and its parts, where then all of a sudden we also began to see an opportunity to get babies' piñatas into it, you know, nurturing from the sugar that is oozing out.
Well, the way that we imagined the interior of the piñata also was that different portions would have different types of candy. And so if you know this in advance, you might you know, go for the tail end because you really like the candy that's there. Or, so, you know, each kind of area has a different, just like a cow or something like that. They all have different cuts. So this piñata has different cuts too. And, well, let's just say you really want to eat the baby, but
yeah,
they're very good.
Not the one in the ones in the gallery.
Hands off.
Here, just the image showing serial sections through the body, and really begin to notice how different morphologies in the body and the surfaces begin to kind of reveal and peel the the volume and the space within the spaces of the piñata.
Yeah, and also just the tactile qualities of the piñata that we really haven't discussed so much. We were very interested in like all the material that actually goes into this, and one of the greatest sensations when you are playing with like a piñata is if it's not, originally they were made out of clay, and the feeling that you get when you hit a large hanging clay vessel is quite a bit different than the feeling that you get when you hit a paper mache shape. And so we were very interested in the way that you kind of understand an object also through, in this case, the rod that you hit it with. And so some of the features that we designed into the piñata and kind of the materials that we used were really about kind of feeling that piñata in a different way. And so, yeah. Oops. Well, okay. A view. This is a close-up of one of the babies. And so it has features similar to the mother piñata. However, its arms have not congealed with the rest of the body. This is kind of it in various states. Which brings us back to Fragonard. And I mean, one of the things that is super, besides just this image, prevalent in our work is kind of our interest in the Rococo and some of the other kind of styles and eras that architecture has gone through. And mainly we're interested in some of the ones that are a little bit overlooked or what have you. And because we see a lot of potential in what they were trying to do, and we're.
So I mean, when we talk about our design approach, and we really tried, and for the past year and a half, we have been really researching the Rococo. So for us, it's a way to really get into certain characteristics that are often overlooked in these periods of architecture, and therefore they seem to be delegated towards other fields. And once we kind of locate one, when we very specifically tackle it, and we try to get some of those elements out into not only an interior space or a building or an object, but just really seeing how the research can lead us on to different opportunities to create atmosphere and very immersive environments. So the next series of slides just try to give you an idea of some of the themes and terminology that we think it's important, and some of them reference the Baroque, some of them, a lot of them reference the Rococo, and some of them we actually kind of made up.
Yeah. Bel Composto is the merging of art, humans, and nature. These are just themes, just like babies, that we were interested in. Sculpture and architecture. Not just, okay, we gotta keep going. Animal posturing. The pleasurable, which is super key. Biological matter. Frothy seams. And coloration. Oh, and we forgot the humorous, which is definitely important, and which Christina brought up, and which is another reason why we love the baby omelet. It's hilarious. That's all there is. And architecture should be hilarious. So, and we'll leave you with this.
Leave you with this, and leave you with the pieces that we have in the show. The piñata is just has really taken a life of its own, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you.